Hey there guys, it's me with a small bonus video for you related to the Even More ASMR Maps video. This deals with this atlas, which is one of the pieces we looked at in that video. This is the 1933 Literary Digest World Atlas and International Gazetteer. And below that, I have a Collier's World Atlas from 1955. And I have them both here because they both kind of play into telling the same story. Now, this didn't come up in the video that I shot for the channel because I didn't use any state maps in the video for the channel. And it's something specific about the state maps that both of these atlases have that's very interesting, and it's well, to me, okay, it's very interesting to me, I got it, but it's a couple of interesting data points to remind us of a different era in popular transportation, I guess I can say. And so I've got the atlas flipped open to a random state. This is Minnesota. And it was interesting to me when I really started studying these old atlases, is that if you look closely, and I don't know if you'll be able to see this very well or not in the video, but there are plenty of straight lines that connect the various little towns and cities on this map. But whereas on a modern road map, highway map, these lines would all be roads. On this map, all of these lines are railroads. And it's a reminder that, commuter rail used to be a lot more of a thing than it is now. I don't think it really is much of anything now, at least not in the United States. But back then, it was a fairly developed infrastructure. And certainly until the 1930s was a default mode of moving people around, as well as freight, of course. And we can tell that these are railroad lines instead of roads because underneath each of them is a collection of initials that represent the railroad company that operated that line. And the state maps in the 1955 atlas are set up exactly the same way. They show railroads instead of roads, so much so that in the 1955 atlas, there's this key or index page near the very beginning of the atlas, key to railroad abbreviations. So this 1955 atlas was interested enough in making sure that you knew all about the railroad options that were in a particular state, that they gave you a key up at the front that you could actually look up the initials and find out the railroad company for an area that you were interested in. And I think that's pretty fascinating. Again, a thing that we touch on in this map series is, what is the map going to be used for, and how does that inform the data that's left in or out of a particular map? And it's fascinating to me that, Rand McNally in this case, or Collier's in this case, would feel that it's important for the user of a world atlas in the States be able to look up the railroad companies that operate lines from point A to point B in the state maps in that atlas. It seems a little specific to me, but maybe a world atlas was one of the most convenient places to assemble this much railroad specific information in one place, and maybe it was this is speculation. I'm not a historian, but maybe this was an easy way for an average person, either if they had an atlas like this or if they went to a library, to do basic trip planning from state to state or from point A to point B in a state. I don't know. That's what stood out to me, is that A, it was railroads instead of state highways. That was interesting. But that B, they would go through the trouble to list the carriers in a world atlas. It seemed, just kind of stood out to me as an interesting data point. And we can look up a couple of these guys, like this one here, that's right above my fingertip. This line from Granite Falls to Glencoe. I'm not sure. The orange line is going right through the letter. But this says CMSP and P. And if we go over here, CMSP and P is the Chicago, Milwaukee, St. Paul, and Pacific Railroad. Or if we, so this line here that angles up to the northeast, it says GNGN. If we look that up over here, GN stands for the Great Northern. So that's the Great Northern Railroad. It's also interesting and coincidental that I have an atlas here from the 30s and an atlas here from the 50s, and they both show, in fact, well, we can look. They both show the same manner of detail in terms of the railroads. Let's look at the same state, Minnesota. They use the same state color. Oh no, they were, all the states were yellow in 1933, I guess, but it's still yellow in 1955. But anyway, you can see red lines are the railroads and blue is water. Black dots are the towns, but there are no black lines or any other color lines for state highways. Here's to pick out another one. Here's one that says C and NW. The C and NW is the Carolina and Northwestern Railroad. But these are two interesting data points, right? Because from what I've read, anyway, I'm not a historian, but from what I've read, the 1930s, when this atlas was made, was when the growing popularity of automobile travel started to cut into the commuter rail. Commuter is the wrong word, right? It's rail for people travel versus freight, started to cut into that market share. And then this atlas was done in 1955, and in the 50s and the 60s, the construction of the interstate highway system in the United States, as well as the popularity of commercial air travel, really put the hammer down on using rail for personal travel. So it's an interesting set of bookends, I guess you could say, these two data points, the 30s and the 50s. But interesting also that all through this period, that rail would be the default transportation infrastructure that was listed in a world atlas. I don't have a recent world atlas, but I'm very, very sure that state maps in a modern world atlas would contain state highway information like a normal highway map would, and none of the railroad information. Of course, there are many, many fewer miles of railroad track in the nation nowadays compared to these decades, and it's nearly all freight, used for freight. So anyway, a couple of interesting data points that I found, a couple of reminders of a different time and a transition period, I suppose you could say, from rail to cars and airplanes for moving people around. So I hope this has been a little bit interesting. Thanks so much for watching, and we will see you next time.